What's up, YouTube? Tim Moose here. Here is my throwback segment where I talk about the films that turns 10, 20, 30, and 40 this week. Alright, the film celebrating their 10th anniversary is, of course, Furious 7. Now, if you guys remember, Furious 7 was sadly the last Fast and Furious movie to feature Paul Walker because he did tragically pass away and they had to, shoot around it. And majority of the times it was to finish up his scenes. It was mostly his one of his brothers that was finishing it. I still remember seeing this one in theaters. Who would ever expect anyone to actually tear up with a Fast and Furious movie? I'm not gonna lie, I did choke up a little bit, especially towards the end. With the "See You Again" song, and of course, Dominic Toretto and Brian O'Connor, in the car going their separate ways. Who did not tear up with that song? And you could definitely tell, at the end when they were all looking at Paul Walker, with his family. You can definitely tell, the cast, the actors of Furious 7 was really choking up on that scene. I really quite enjoyed it a lot, though. This take the sadness aside, it was still a pretty decent film. I know lots of people think that Furious 7 should have been the last one, but you know what? The Fast and Furious movies, say what you want about them, they are $1 billion franchise. We're going to be getting a final one next year. We're going to be getting obviously the Hobbs one. I still quite enjoyed this a whole lot, and I'm definitely excited for more. And yeah, of course, you had Ronda Rousey. By the way, Ronda Rousey versus Michelle Rodriguez. Awesome fight scene. Of course, Jason Statham. I just quite enjoyed this one a whole lot. And it's definitely one of my top tiers favorite out of the franchise. I still think probably my favorite is still Fast Five. Maybe one of these days I'll do a ranking. Maybe once the final one comes out, maybe I'll do a whole ranking of the Fast and Furious movies someday. Along with Hobbs and Shaw, obviously. I mean, which Fast and Furious movie is your favorite? Comment below. Anyway, now also turning 10 is Woman in Gold, which of course had Helen Mirren, Ryan Reynolds. Nice little film, by the way. If of course you guys don't know, it is based on a true story of an elderly Jewish refugee living in Choviet Hills, and together with her young lawyer played by Ryan Reynolds. Fought the government of Austria for most decades to reclaim Gustav's Klimt's iconic painting. Of course, you also had Tatiana Maslany. Closest thing we ever get to see Deadpool and She-Hulk in something together. This is the closest thing we ever get to see of Deadpool and She-Hulk here. Jonathan Pryce, really nice little film. The chemistry, I really like the chemistry between Helen Mirren and Ryan Reynolds. They really play off each other really well. Dana Brühl is also in this. Really decent film if you guys haven't seen it. Alright, also turning 10 is not really a movie that many people probably haven't heard of, but because the director has a big film coming out this year, I decided to include this. It's a movie titled Cut Bank. Now, Cut Bank stars Liam Hemsworth, Billy Bob Thornton, John Malkovich, Teresa Palmer, and it follows a witness to a murder who wants to get rich off what he saw. This is actually a really underrated little film. Now, the reason why I am talking about this, it is directed by Matt Shakman, who, if that name sounds familiar, he has a little movie coming out this summer called Fantastic Four: First Steps. And this is actually a really nice little film he did, though. So cool. Now he also obviously directed, WandaVision as well and other TV stuff. But before Fantastic Four, he has had his flange movies. Cut Bank really had a little bit of a Fargo feel to it. It was of course released by A24. Probably one of A24's most underappreciated films, in my opinion. It had some crazy twists and turns around. If you guys haven't seen it, I say give it a go. Really decent little film worth checking out. And this, of course, has John Malkovich, who, by the way, is going to be in Fantastic Four. So, there's that. Alright. 20 years is Sin City. I love Sin City. You got Jessica Alba, the late great Michael Clark Duncan, the late great Brittany Murphy, Josh Hartnett, Rutger Hauer, Michael Madsen, Bruce Willis, Elijah Wood, co-directed by Robert Rodriguez, Frank Miller, based on a comic book by Frank Miller. Some great cool story arcs. Elijah Wood was so creepy in this. Like, it's not a horror movie, but I used to always get terrified by Elijah Wood's character. Um, and of course Rosario Dawson. I mean, Sin City is excellent. Great cast list. I love the black and white feel to it. I always had a fun time with this one. They also did a sequel, The Dames You Kill For, which actually isn't as bad too. But the first, nothing beats the first film. I'd love to go back to the world Sin City. I mean, I know Dames You Kill For didn't do so well, but maybe a TV show one of these days that could be cool. But it'll be awesome to go back to the world Sin City. Anyway, also turning 20 is Beauty Shop, which is like a spin-off of Barbershop 2, starring Queen Latifah as hairdresser Gina Norris, who has relocated to Atlanta with her daughter and quickly established herself as a rare talent. Here, you got Andy McDowell, Kevin Bacon, Golden Brooks, Della Reese, Jamin Hansoon. By the way, he was also in Fear 7, so interesting time for Jamin. Mina Savari. I was never a fan of it. Like, I love the first Barbershop, and actually, I'd probably say I think part 3 is my favorite out of the franchise. I know so many people will probably say the first Barbershop is their favorite, but I always appreciated part 3. Something about part 3 was, I'll obviously talk more about that next year, but part 3 is so good, man. I'd love to see more Barbershops in the future, but Beauty Shop, I was never too big with. I mean, Queen Latifah was okay, but it just didn't have the same. It didn't have the same feel as the Barbershop movies. It just maybe because Cedric the Entertainer wasn't on board, maybe that's it. But yeah, it was never too big. And you also had like Lil JJ. Who remembers Lil JJ, right? But yeah, this one just didn't do it for me. All right, turning 30 this week is one of the best comedies of that era, Tommy Boy. Of course, this was the first, pretty much the first film to star SNL buddies Chris Farley, David Spade. I believe this was actually Chris Farley's first ever like lead role. Like beforehand, obviously he I think this was around the time where he also did like appeared in Billy Madison, Coneheads, and all. This was actually the first time he really had like his leading role because obviously he was coming like he was still very popular on SNL. And of course, this is where former SNL castmates tells us, and it tells the story of a socially and emotionally immature man played by Chris Farley, who learns lessons about friendship and self worth following the sudden death of his father. You also have like Dan Aykroyd, Bo Derek, Brian Dennehy. Tommy Boy is hilarious. I mean, I miss Chris Farley, by the way. I was young, obviously, very young when Chris Farley did his SNL days. I was pretty much like still a baby at the time, but I didn't really watch his SNL days until like years later. I always loved Chris Farley, man. Every time I saw like interviews with him on not David Spade, David Letterman. I meant some of his SNL sketches. You guys never seen any of his SNL sketches, whether you talk about the Chip and Dale one with Patrick Swayze, or whether you talk about um, uh, Live in a Van Down by the River. I mean, the guy had funny comedic timings, and of course, him and David Spade in this were both great. I mean, they really had great chemistry with one another. Some fun moments in this. I mean, it's also directed by Pierre Siegel, who will go on to direct 50 First Dates, Get Smart, many others. If you guys have not watched Tommy Boy, do yourself a favor. Pop it on. I don't know where you can find nowadays, but if you ever find it, whether it's on Netflix, any other streaming sites, do yourself a favor. Get a couple of beers. It's hilarious to watch. All right. Also turning 30 is Jefferson in Paris, which of course stars Nick Nolte, which is like a semi-fictional account of Thomas Jefferson's tenure as the ambassador of U.S. States to France before his presidency. You had Gwyneth Paltrow, Tennessee Newen. It's actually not a bad film. I mean, Nick Nolte really played off Thomas Jefferson pretty well. I don't think this really got the best reviews, but it's actually not a bad little film if you guys have seen it. Now, also turning 30 is Funny Bones with Oliver Platt, the late great Jerry Lewis, Leslie Caron. It's where like this aspiring comedian Tommy Fox, played by Oliver Platt, returns to his childhood home of Blackpool, England, to find an unknown young comedian whose act he can take over. Jerry Lewis, obviously, who doesn't love Jerry Lewis, right? Living legend there. Oliver Platt was pretty good in this. Really funny little comedy if you guys haven't seen that. You also had like Richard Griffiths was also in this, who you might know as the uncle from the Harry Potter films. He also had a part in this. Really funny little fun comedy there. All right, also turning 30 is Born to Be Wild, which stars Helen Shaver, Thomas F. Wilson, aka Biff from Back to the Future, Alan Ruck, who you might know from Ferris Bueller fame, John C. McClane, Peter Doyle. It's of course where like a young female gorilla is captured in the mountains of Africa and flown to California, where behavioral researcher Margaret Heller begins teaching her sign language, and of course Heller's moody teen son Rick, played by Will Horneff, bonds with the primate here. Peter Boyle, who you might know as the dad from Everybody Loves Raymond, or you might also remember him from Scooby Doo 2. Old Man Withers. Obviously, he's always more known for Everybody Loves Raymond, but as a Scooby Doo fan, I always remember him as Old Man Withers from Scooby Doo 2. But that's the thing. Or Young Frankenstein. He's been in some great stuff over the years, but Pierre Boyle is great in this one. R.I.P. Pierre Boyle. Of course, Alan Ruck was in this. It is a really nice little film worth giving a go. The 90s was like very big when it came to animal movies. Like the 90s was the same year that we saw the stuff like Gorillas in the Mist, Babe, what else? Oh yeah, Free Willy, obviously Air Bud. I mean, the 90s, you couldn't go throughout obviously I was a baby, so I don't know much about the 90s. But throughout looking the list of the 90s stuff, you probably couldn't go through a year of the 90s without seeing a movie about an animal. And this one was definitely no exception. Alright. Now, as for the 4-year one, not really anything to go by except for Alamo Boy, which stars Amy Madigan and Ed Harris, and of course Dallas Cowboy linebacker that Nyan. It's pretty much about like a Vietnam veteran who clashes with Vietnamese immigrants who moves to his Texas Bay hometown. It's not really too memorable. Like I don't even remember if I ever saw this one or not, but if you guys remember Alamo Boy, it turns 4 this week. But who doesn't love Ed Harris, right? And of course, you might remember Amy Madigan from Field of Dreams. Who remembers her that? But that's pretty much it there. Let me let you guys. Which of these films stand out to you the most? To me, the 10-year one is of course going to Furious 7. The 20-year one is Sin City. The 30-year one is Tommy Boy. Not really much to go by with the 40 one. Anyway, drop comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell for notification. This is Simon Sign.